Before we begin, please like and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to hear today could completely change the way you see life. Have you ever noticed that sometimes it seems like everything goes wrong, no matter how much you pray, work, and try to do the right thing? Have you ever considered that perhaps the problem isn't in the world, but in the way your mind is configured to perceive it? Napoleon Hill said that, "What the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." And the Bible confirms this in Proverbs 23:7. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What you think shapes what you live. It's that simple. But here's the paradox. People pray for prosperity while harboring thoughts of scarcity. They ask for peace, but constantly talk about fear. And then they wonder why the universe doesn't seem to respond. But God has never stopped acting. It's the mind that has forgotten how to listen. Today, you will understand how to align thought, faith, and action to completely transform your reality. The truth is that the impossible is not a punishment. It's an invitation. An invitation to access the strength that already exists within you. The same strength that moved giants, that made kings win wars, and that can still open paths where there was only desert. And if you are watching this video now, it's not by chance. It's because the time for your turnaround has begun, and your mind is about to learn how to cooperate with the purpose that God designed for you. The mind as the key to the impossible. Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes the biggest obstacle isn't outside, but inside your own head? Napoleon Hill said that, "Whatever the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." And the Bible confirms this. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. In other words, before something happens in the physical world, it first needs to happen in the mind. It all begins with a mental image, a thought that decides not to succumb to doubt. But here's the point. Most people live as if the mind were the enemy, not the ally. They nurture thoughts of scarcity, repeat negative phrases, and then are surprised when they reap frustrating results. It's like planting lemons and expecting to harvest grapes. The universe, created by a God of order, responds to every mental seed you plant, whether of faith or fear. And often, the impossible only seems impossible because you haven't yet learned to think correctly. When a person understands that the mind is the key, they stop asking the world for permission to dream. They begin to act in harmony with faith, even when the scenario seems unfavorable. It is at this point that the impossible begins to bend before determination. And if you are hearing this now, perhaps it is because you are about to understand how the right mindset can align everything: faith, focus, and action. Faith, focus, and alignment. Faith is the compass that points the way, but focus is the firm step that gets you there. Napoleon Hill said that faith is the eternal elixir that gives life to thought, and the Bible reinforces this. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Hebrews 11:6. When mind, heart, and action walk in the same direction, the impossible ceases to be a wall and becomes a bridge. Internal confusion is what most delays dreams. People who pray for something but think the opposite all day long. That's why many people live weary lives. They pray for prosperity, but feel fear every time they open their wallet. The universe doesn't respond to words, but to vibration. The secret lies in aligning feeling with thought and thought with faith. Want a simple example? Instead of saying, "I'm broke," say, "I'm getting my finances in order." It seems like a small detail, but it changes the frequency and, over time, changes the result. Faith without focus is like wind. Focus without faith is like a desert. When the two meet, the creative power that moves mountains is born. And believe me, every step in alignment with your faith attracts circumstances, people, and opportunities that seem like miracles, but are simply responses to a well-positioned heart. Now the next step is to understand what prevents you from maintaining this alignment. And that's where the most subtle trap of the human mind lies. Breaking the cycle of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is like a silent thief that enters through the window of the mind when you leave the door of consciousness open. Napoleon Hill called it the inner enemy, one that feeds on doubt, fear, and indecision. The Bible also warns, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." James 1:8. While faith says, "Go," insecurity whispers, "What if it doesn't work out?" The result is paralysis, and nothing flourishes in the soil of hesitation. Often a person may even have talent, but they sabotage themselves because they learned long ago that they weren't good enough. A childhood comment, a poorly digested failure, an unfair comparison, all of this becomes an invisible script that they begin to repeat without realizing it. That's why, even wanting to change, they end up returning to old habits. Want a simple exercise? Start by observing your automatic thoughts. Every time something negative arises, ask yourself, is this a fact or just fear disguised as logic? When the mind is monitored, the cycle is broken. It's like changing the autopilot on an airplane. The destination changes, even if the landscape still seems the same. And the more a person observes themselves, the more they realize that the enemy was never external. It was the fear of believing in their own God-given power. The good news is that this power can be trained, and the first training begins with the renewal of the mind. The mind renewal method. Renewing your mind is like changing a computer's software. Installing new programs is useless if the old system is still corrupted. The Bible is direct about this. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Napoleon Hill said that no one can change external circumstances without first changing internally. In other words, the new only arrives when you decide to think in a new way. But renewing your mind is not an event. It's a daily process of conscious choice. This method begins with observation. Every time a negative thought arises, you have two options: feed it or replace it. For example, when the fear of failure appears, replace it with, "I am learning to trust the process." It may seem simple, but the brain doesn't distinguish between imagination and reality. It only responds to the command you repeat with emotion. Hill called this auto-suggestion, and it's exactly what the Bible teaches when it talks about meditating day and night on the Word. Over time, the mind is reprogrammed, and what was once struggle becomes nature. You begin to think with faith and act with wisdom. Doors that seemed locked open, not because the world has changed, but because your perspective has been healed. And it is at this point that the power of vibration comes into play. Because when the mind is renewed, the frequency changes, and the entire universe responds. The law of vibration and the power of words. Everything in the universe vibrates. From the smallest cell to the largest planet, everything moves in frequency. Napoleon Hill explained that thought is a form of vibrational energy that attracts others of the same nature. The Bible, long before science, already declared, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." Proverbs 18-21. In other words, what you say carries a vibration capable of building or destroying your own path. Each word is a seed sown in the soil of time. Many people pray for miracles, but spend the rest of the day complaining, and don't realize they are negating their own prayer. The universe responds not only to the voice, but to the emotion behind it. Saying, "I trust in God," with fear in your heart is like sending a letter without a stamp. The message doesn't arrive. Want to change your reality? Start by changing the tone of the words that come out of your mouth. Try replacing "I can't take it anymore" with "I'm growing with this challenge." The effect is immediate. The mind aligns with faith. When you raise your vibration, the environment responds. Heavy situations dissipate. The right people come closer, and opportunities arise as confirmations. It's the law of divine correspondence. Like attracts like. And that's why spiritual discipline is so necessary, because maintaining a high vibration requires training, focus, and consistency. And that's exactly what the next part is about: how to combine faith, discipline, and method to keep your frequency at its peak every day. Discipline, faith, and method. Faith without discipline is like a car without a steering wheel. It has an engine, but no direction. Napoleon Hill taught that faith needs a definite plan and persistent action. And the Bible confirms this. Faith without works is dead. James 2:17. That's why believing isn't enough. You need to act methodically, even when the initial enthusiasm fades. Those who rely solely on motivation give up on cloudy days. But those who live by discipline walk firmly even through storms. Discipline is what transforms promise into result. Waking up earlier, reading something uplifting, planning the day and fulfilling what was promised, all of this is spiritual. God honors continuous effort, not fleeting impulse. Hill said that great achievers had an almost sacred routine, and it's true. Success doesn't come from chance. It comes from habit. For example, setting aside 15 minutes daily to write down goals and be grateful for what you already have creates a powerful field of focus and gratitude. When faith and method unite, progress ceases to be an isolated miracle and becomes a way of life. The impossible becomes familiar to those who don't give up. And it is at this point that the enemy tries to act, sabotaging consistency with distractions and fears disguised as prudence. Therefore, before learning to do more, it is necessary to learn to eliminate what steals your energy. This is the next step: identifying the invisible blocks that keep you away from what God has prepared for you. Invisible blocks and mental reprogramming. The greatest enemies of prosperity are not external, they are internal, and almost always invisible. Napoleon Hill called them ghosts of the mind: fear, doubt, indecision, envy, and guilt. The Bible also speaks of them when it teaches that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, 2 Corinthians 10:4. These strongholds are fixed thoughts that keep us trapped in a pattern of scarcity. The mind builds walls and then believes that the world is closed off. Reprogramming the mind means tearing down those walls with new truths. It's when you start telling yourself what God has already said about you, and not what fear insists on repeating. For example, instead of, "I am not capable," say, "I can do all things through Him who strengthens me." Philippians 4:13. Hill taught the same principle when he spoke of autosuggestion, repeating with emotion what you want to manifest. The brain learns through repetition, and faith grows through hearing. Over time, this mental training transforms not only thoughts, but attitudes. You begin to make different decisions, attract new opportunities, and, without realizing it, start vibrating at a higher frequency. The mind ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a fertile garden. And it is in this new state that the power of abundance is born. Because when the heart is healed, the vibration changes, and everything around you changes too. Vibration of abundance and real-life examples. The vibration of abundance isn't just about money, it's about state of mind. Napoleon Hill said that a mind that remains in harmony with faith is a radio station that attracts opportunities. And the Bible already stated, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." Proverbs 17:22. When you vibrate joy, gratitude, and purpose, the universe responds with coincidences that aren't coincidences. They're confirmations. Take Ayrton Senna as an example. Before racing, he would pray in the car, close his eyes, and connect with something greater. That wasn't superstition. It was attunement. Louisa Trajano, in the business world, does the same with a different language. She maintains her enthusiasm, even in the face of crises. And Geraldo Rufino, a can collector who became a businessman, repeats that the secret is to be grateful before deserving. They all understood the same law. Vibration precedes manifestation. Maintaining a high frequency isn't about denying reality. It's about choosing not to be overwhelmed by it. It's about knowing that God works through gratitude, not complaining. Hill said that a disciplined mind emanates a type of energy that shapes circumstances. And that's why those who vibrate with abundance attract people and places that reflect that light. But there's a point that few realize. It's useless to vibrate at a high frequency if the surrounding environment pulls you down. And that's what we need to talk about now. The power of the environment and companies. The environment is like a silent mirror. It reflects what you tolerate, not what you desire. Napoleon Hill warned that no one becomes great surrounded by small thoughts. And the Bible agrees. Bad company corrupts good morals. 1 Corinthians 15:33. If you want to grow, you need to examine the soil where you are planting. Because even the best seed dies if the ground is toxic. Sometimes, life change begins with the simple decision to distance yourself from those who drag you down. Notice, when you spend time with people who dream, you start to dream too. When you associate with those who complain, your mind gets used to seeing the worst in everything. The environment shapes thought, and thought shapes destiny. That's why Napoleon Hill talked about the mastermind, the union of minds with the same purpose. Choosing your company wisely is choosing your future wisely. And that applies to everything. Friendships, content, music, and even what you follow on social media. The Bible teaches, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Philippians 4:8. In other words, select what nourishes your soul. Create an environment that reminds you of who you want to be, not who you were. Because when your surroundings vibrate in alignment with your purpose, progress becomes natural. And this prepared environment is the ideal field for the next step, transforming faith into inspired action, and planning with purpose. Inspired action. Faith that thinks and acts. True faith is not passive. It is movement. Napoleon Hill said that dreams only take shape when thought becomes action. And the Bible confirms this. Show me your faith without works, and I will show you my faith by my works. James 2:18. In other words, believing is the first step, but acting is the seal of confidence. It's easy to wait for the perfect moment, but the secret is to act with what you have, and God multiplies it along the way. Inspired action isn't about rushing, it's about direction. It's different from doing a lot. It's about doing it right, at the right time, with the right heart. Sometimes, a small decision made in faith has more power than a gigantic plan made in fear. Hill said that indecision is the cradle of failure, and the Bible teaches, well-laid plans lead to abundance. Proverbs 21:5. In other words, praying is spiritual, but planning is too. God doesn't bless haste, He blesses purpose. When you combine prayer, clarity, and action, the universe responds. Things begin to fall into place. Doors open, and what seemed distant draws closer. It's the power of intelligent faith, the kind that prays in the morning and works in the afternoon with the same enthusiasm. But there's an even deeper level, when action becomes a partnership with God Himself. That's where the true power to manifest the invisible in the physical world emerges. Manifesting with God. Partnership between heaven and action. Manifesting isn't magic, it's partnership. Napoleon Hill taught that every achievement is born from an ardent desire coupled with unwavering faith. And the Bible confirms this spiritual principle. He calls into existence the things that are not as though they already were. Romans 4:17. When you align yourself with God, you stop asking and start declaring. The difference between those who manifest and those who only dream is the certainty that heaven and earth work together. God doesn't accomplish alone what He has called you to cooperate in. He plants the purpose, but expects you to plant the effort. That's how the invisible becomes visible. Faith defines destiny, and action paves the way. Hill called this defined purpose, and it's the same thing the Bible calls walking by faith, not by sight. When a person understands this, they stop insisting on when and start asking, how can I cooperate with God's plan? Manifesting with God means understanding that He is not a genie in a lamp, but a Father who works with principles. He wants you to prosper, but not without maturing you. Every challenge is an opportunity to prove that you are ready to receive. And when this partnership is true, even the impossible becomes routine. But there is something essential to sustain this: understanding the purpose of prosperity and the spiritual value of serving. Prosperity, service, and spiritual stewardship. To prosper is much more than having money. It's about having purpose in what you do. Napoleon Hill said that wealth is the result of a disciplined mind dedicated to serving more and better. The Bible confirms this principle. Whoever is faithful in small matters will also be faithful in large ones. Luke 16:10. In other words, money is not a reward, it's a consequence. God doesn't bestow abundance into the hands of those who don't know how to care for what they already have. Prosperity is a spiritual responsibility. There are people who pray for a harvest, but don't tend to the seed. Do you want to prosper? Serve. Do what nobody wants to do, and do it with excellence. The market, like heaven, rewards those who serve wholeheartedly. As Hill says, he who does more than he is paid to do will soon be paid for more than he does. The world changes when you understand that serving is not about lowering yourself, but about elevating yourself to a level of consciousness where the focus shifts from I to we. Prosperity also requires order, both material and spiritual. The Bible teaches, God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. 1 Corinthians 14:33. When there is order, the flow of abundance becomes natural. An organized home, a clear mind, a grateful heart. This is fertile ground for divine favor. And when this harmony takes hold, the next step is learning to rest in God, trusting in the perfect timing of the harvest. Consistency, peace, and trust in the process. Consistency is the secret of those who win in silence. Napoleon Hill said that persistence is to character what steel is to a blade. The Bible agrees. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Galatians 6:9. It's easy to believe when everything is going well, but true faith is continuing to plant even when the sky seems closed. God works behind the scenes while humankind learns to trust. Peace doesn't come from the absence of problems, but from the presence of purpose. When you understand that each phase has a reason, despair gives way to wisdom. Hill explained that failure is merely a temporary detour on the path to success, and the Bible calls this a test of faith. Just as gold is purified by fire, human beings are shaped by life's trials. And the more you learn to remain steadfast, the more prepared you become for what you have asked for. Trusting the process means knowing that God's timing isn't clock time, but the time of maturation. It's about continuing to do what is right, even when no one is watching. This is what differentiates those who desire from those who are ready to receive. And when this trust becomes a lifestyle, the heart understands that purpose isn't the destination, it's the journey. And it's precisely on this journey that the legacy begins to be built. Legacy, purpose, and identity. There comes a point when the search ceases to be for achievements and becomes a search for meaning. Napoleon Hill said that the true measure of success is the positive impact left on the lives of others. And the Bible confirms this. For we were created in Christ Jesus to do good works. Ephesians 2:10. Purpose is the invisible thread that connects your pain to your destiny. Everything you have experienced, even what seemed like loss, was part of the training for what God has called you to do. Legacy isn't what you accumulate, it's what you transmit. It can be in a word, a gesture, an example. Hill called this transferred mental energy, and it's what the Bible describes as fruit that remains. When you discover your identity in God, you stop competing and start contributing. You are no longer measured by what you have, but by how much you transform. Purpose is serving the world with what has been freely given to you. And the most beautiful thing is that the legacy is born from within. No one builds it overnight. It flourishes through consistency. Every coherent action, every choice made with love, is a brick in the construction of something eternal. And when you understand who you are, the fear of tomorrow loses its power, because your being begins to guide your doing. It is at this point that faith ceases to be just belief and becomes a lifestyle. And that is where the final step begins, walking with God in full action. There comes a time when thinking and believing are no longer enough. You need to act. Napoleon Hill said that, "The world doesn't pay for what you know, but for what you do with what you know." The Bible reinforces the same principle. If you are willing and obedient, you will eat the best of the land. Isaiah 1:19. Faith that walks is one that wakes up early, acts with purpose, and doesn't wait for motivation to begin. It is practical faith, the kind that transforms promises into action. Walking with God isn't about perfection, but about persistence. Hill taught that every firm step, however small, is more powerful than a race driven by fear. And the Bible shows the same in the story of Abraham, who left without knowing where he was going. He simply trusted. Faith that walks is like that, taking the first step even without seeing the whole staircase. And the incredible thing is that, when you move, the path begins to form beneath your feet. God doesn't ask for speed, He asks for faithfulness. He doesn't demand that you have all the answers, only that you don't stop walking. And when that faith becomes action, the impossible becomes routine, and the extraordinary becomes natural. It's the point where purpose, action, and spirituality unite. And it's precisely here that the final invitation happens. To apply all of this, put it into practice, and live what you've learned. Now tell me, what good is understanding all this if you continue letting life push you on autopilot? Napoleon Hill taught that action is the true measure of intelligence, and the Bible confirms, faith without works is dead. James 2:26. So the time is now. Change doesn't begin when the world gets better, but when you decide to act differently, with faith, focus, and consistency. Stop for a moment and reflect. What has your mind led you to believe about yourself? What voices have you allowed to dwell within your head? If today you choose to reprogram your thoughts, speak constructively, and act with purpose, your reality will begin to bend to your new vibration. It's not magic, it's spiritual law applied with discipline. So I want you to write here in the comments, I choose to prosper with God. I want to read, respond to, and walk with you on this journey of transformation. And if this message has sparked something within you, like the video now, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because every week we'll build a new mindset together, richer, lighter, and more aligned with the purpose that heaven has written for your life. Your mind has already received the code. Now it's time to type the password, Action with Faith.